Thank you very much for having me. It is such a pleasure to be here again. I'm truly honored and thankful. Laura, you're going to keep me on track? Right, okay, great. Laura's going to make sure I don't talk too long. I'm happy to be back here again. A very brief overview. Turning Point Energy is a company I started a few years back. We develop, we advise, we invest primarily in solar projects. We'll be adding storage and wind and other things of that nature as we go forward. But we come from the solar world and background. Our team, and myself included, have over 500 megawatts of installed solar projects around the country and the contiguous United States, over about 10 states over the last dozen years. We've been doing this for quite some time. Prior to Turning Point Energy, I ran Solon Corporation's U.S. operation on the development side. Prior to that, I helped to start up and run Sonnetis' utility scale business after participating in their C&I business for several years. And then prior to that, I was with Johnson Controls in the energy efficiency and infrastructure business. So I'm coming to this presentation from those angles, just so you know where my head's at, coming, the context, if you would. So I have been asking a lot of you who I've seen yesterday and today, what have you been doing for the last year since I saw you last? And so I thought it would be fair for me to answer that same basic question for you all as well. My little company has been, we worked on one of the first community solar projects in Texas. We didn't have legislation and all kinds of interesting policy work around it. It was a cooperative utility who said to their customers, "You want solar?" The customer said, "Yeah." And they said, "Great, will you pay a little bit extra for a fixed, and we'll lock your rate for 5 years?" "Yeah, that sounds great." And they sold the program out in 90 days. And now we're building a second project for them right now down in Texas. Another cooperative utility in New Mexico came to us and said, "We want to do solar, we can't figure out how to get financing, we're too small and rural." So we said, "Fine." We figured out how to do it without the ITC, somewhere between 6 and 8 cents a kilowatt hour of electricity value without the use of the ITC in New Mexico. 1 megawatt, not a bad deal. Tri-state, very large G&T in Colorado, we just finished bringing in an investor, D.E. Schoch, which is a very large hedge fund, to purchase that from us. They're going to build it and own it and operate it for the long term. In partnership with Tri-State, that project will get built next year. We're building a small second phase for an elementary school that we really like in Colorado because we want to help our neighbors. And then what I wanted to make sure to mention is MREA. So Nick and his group that are definitely here, saw them yesterday, and I'm going to see them again today. I'm working closely with them as an advisor or as a consultant. They're working with the U of M, Purdue, Illinois State, and Missouri S&T to put curriculum and solar development together on campus. So how do we teach students in finance and engineering and legal backgrounds and from an academic perspective, how do we teach those people and actually help them develop their own projects on campus for themselves, give them real world experience. So it's been a pretty interesting process, and continue to enjoy doing that. We've got one more 10 megawatt portfolio with a couple municipal utilities in Virginia we just won, and we're not going to do any more projects for next year. We're closing the door on 2016 projects. If you don't have your contracts and you're not well on your way, your projects aren't going to get done anyways. So that's sort of what I've been up to, or what my group's been up to for the last year. So why am I here today? One is to reflect, one is to remind, to measure, and to look ahead. On the reflecting part, I'm not talking about reflecting on Minnesota. We'll get to Minnesota for sure. I'm going to start much higher, bigger kind of macro level from that standpoint. Look what between the last time I was here and now, what's changed on the macro level environment that we all live and work in the United States? The first thing I'll talk about is a book I'm in the middle of reading right now, and this is Pope Francis's encyclical on our common home. You don't have to be a Catholic or a Christian or believe in God to enjoy this book. This book is very powerful in its discussion of morality. And when I say morality, what I mean is doing the right thing for each other because it's the right thing to do. For our planet, for ourselves, and everything else. He very quickly reminds us that It's our responsibility as a human race to take care of our planet and everything on that planet. And it's pretty hard to disagree with that from my vantage point. I'm sure some people would. But it's important because it's a major political shift to the conservative political environment in the United States. In the past, we had an environment where there wasn't this moral obligation to essentially fix global warming, and many of the conservative base essentially, they've fought or refused to decide that this is an important item for them, and Pope Francis represents a lot of that conservative base, at least in my viewpoint. So him coming out and then coming in and standing in front of Congress, something that's never been done before by a pope, and actually trying to inject that morality into Congress, we may need a little bit of that in Congress, is a good thing, right? And it's a political shift that we haven't had before. I think literally the day he left, the president of China came, and he and Obama got up and did an announcement that both countries were going to drop basically emissions rates pretty substantively, to the ire of many in the U.S. But the China piece is huge, and it's a huge piece because in the past, one of the biggest excuses for not doing anything about carbon, global warming, whatever we want to call it, has been, well, it's a global problem, and if China doesn't do anything, why should we? Well, that's gone. That's gone. And that's exciting, right? So we have morality in Congress, and now we have one of the largest emitter of carbon in the world saying, we're going to drop this pretty dramatically, and it's opening up to what looks to be one of the largest solar markets in the world, and the global players are very focused right now, I know, on a lot of mobilization in China. If you look at what happened before and then right after, or gosh, not long after that, is the EPA formally files the Clean Power Plan, and that same day, 24 states sued. I wanted this plan 7 years ago. Why the heck did it take 7 years to get it? If Mr. Obama stood here beside me, I would be asking him and screaming that in his face, because it's for me it's almost too late. But maybe I'm wrong, and I hope I'm wrong. And here's evidence that I am wrong. 49 states are making plans for EPA carbon rule, basically the Clean Power Plan. 49 states. 24 states are suing, but 49 states are actually planning on meeting it. Every utility I've talked to for the last year has been working on analyzing, evaluating, figuring out how to do it. If it actually gets done, repealed, changed, modified, is all about the next administration. So execution of this plan is really about the next administration, not about this one. But as it relates to this administration, I applaud them for at least getting it done before they left office. We all saw there's the Republican baseball team, and we'll see how that works out. And then we've got Hillary, who's always going to. I'm a betting man, and I would bet that she would be the representative in the end. But that'll be a fun process to watch, and that will dictate a lot of what's going to happen in our industry, or what could happen at a policy and a strategic leadership level around the country. Congress is still very much a mess. The guy on the left is gone, and God bless him. The guy on the right, I'm excited for him. I'm excited for Ryan in general. Not very excited for his views on what we do. Not very excited about that. Not counting on anything from Congress. That's what I'm used to, and that's what I'm going to continue to be used to. And the last macro level that really saddened me this year is two of my favorite people left the best political satire TV ever in my life. And yeah, one guy replaced Jay Letterman, and he's okay, but he's censored to say what he has to say on the national stage, which is great, but it's not nearly as interesting as it used to be. So, but when we look at the national picture, those are the things that changed. The second reason I'm here is to remind. think about reminding, all I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a handful of slides from the last presentation. I'm going to do it quickly because I don't want to lose you and I don't want to waste time. This slide is, the one on the left is the solar industry's perspective, which is that the utility's always beating on me. They're always beating me down. They're trying to get rid of me. Oh, poor old solar industry. The guy on the right is the utilities view, which is, man, you just keep stealing my food, right? You keep stealing my customers. This is not cool. Stop doing this to me. Would you stop it? Stop it. So if you look at the industry as a whole, actually this isn't in the presentation. Aha. If you look at the industry as a whole, what you find is, we talked about this last year that, hey, we're right along the titanium, 30% ITC, the world's great. There's this iceberg called the deadline coming up at the end of 16, and is this going to be us in 2017? Right? Is that going to be us? It could be. We'll talk about that a little further in a couple more, another section. I looked at and analyzed, sort of looking at the macro here. What are sustainable solar markets for our industry? And it's really a state-by-state decision, as we all know, because every state or country is different. In terms of sustainability, the will of the people, the policy, the infrastructure, the market mechanisms in place and working and thriving. Nothing's going to change in California, Hawaii, or the Northeast as it relates to a thriving industry. I promise you that. That's all going to continue. The question is everywhere else in the country. I put Minnesota last year in the unsustainable list for a specific reason, and that's because you all had the policy victory, but you hadn't implemented anything yet. Implementation demonstrates truth, right? What's actually going to get done. And so, we'll talk more about that as we go in coming slides as well. We also looked at and talked about, 1.5% solar by 2020 for Excel as an example. My best they're going to have it done by the end of next year. We'll see, but I bet they're pretty darn close if not fulfilling that obligation. So what happens after 2016 for their obligations and requirements? And then I'm not going to go through too much of this slide because it's a busy slide. But the fundamental bottom line is everybody's trying to figure out a way to solve the problem. There are a lot of tactics and strategies and approaches you can take. The question is, what's the right one, and how do you get it done? I personally believe that Mencia and many of the people in the room are on the right track in terms of focusing on rates and getting the rate structures right. It's not that solar is not cost effective. I said that the rate structures that are in place today are not effective with solar in a lot of states, and I think that includes a lot of Minnesota. So that is an easy mechanism to change if the will of the people wanted to change it to make it so. There's a lot of complexity and pain around those types of items, but that fundamentally doesn't matter what the ITC does when you all control your own destiny. And the parting advice was, innovation ain't going to solve it fast enough. Don't let greed get in the way. Solve the fundamental problems. Be heard, be loud, be heard. Compromise, and O mio life with the questions of those recurring, of the endless trains of the faithless, of cities filled with the foolish. What good amid these, O me, O life? Answer that you are here. The life exists in identity. That the powerful plays goes on, and you may contribute a verse. That the powerful play goes on, and you may contribute a verse. What will your verse be? Now let's measure. Let's see what your verse has been this last year. This wasn't done last year, but it's been defended in the last year in a very real way. It's been talked about a lot in the last year. You definitely, very clearly have the will of the people behind you. You very clearly have policy or law in place that doesn't ask for but requires change to your energy generation fleet and the way that you all do business in the energy industry. There's no question about that. And that is a powerful, powerful tool that you all have as long as it's in place. I went ahead and took headlines I read all the articles, but I really took the headlines and looked at the headlines and said, well, let's look at the macro level. What's been going on in Minnesota? So coal has been going on in Minnesota. You'll see 3 that are very focused on coal up there. Coal continues to decline, which goes along with the slide we just had. So no big surprises there. How are you going to replace that coal? Well, Xcel CEO says wind energy is cheaper than natural gas in some instances. It's not a across-the-board statement, but it's a statement that is powerful. And so that I applaud that. Xcel has definitely touted that they are the #1 wind company several times, and good for them. And I'm very thankful for their approach there. Natural gas and wind clearly are the backbone of the future in Minnesota, as far as I see. I don't see the word solar involved in any way, shape, or form there. That's a little disturbing for me. Xcel wants to double Minnesota renewable energy mix by 2030. That's good for solar as well. There's a commitment for solar, and I think that's great. And you'll see a couple other pieces. Minnesota town targets 100% renewable energy. That's a municipality taking their life in their own hands and saying, this is what we're going to do. I applaud them over and over and over again for making that choice. And then you've got Minnesota Power up in Duluth, north part of the state, getting into the community solar game as well. So I applaud them as well. Community solar, the Xcel piece of the puzzle, the national industry, the national stage is watching, and they're not very impressed today, right? I've heard the word interconnection queue, interconnection mess, I don't know how many times in the last 24 hours since I've arrived. I've heard from lots of my friends throughout this industry, and if I were the governor or the political powers that be, if Xcel doesn't fix this within the next 60 days, I would take it away from them. Bring in private industry under a state department to do all the interconnection studies and do all the interconnection build. No, not doing it is unacceptable, and it's pathetic. So I'm really hopeful that somehow enough noise is made to get the attention of the people that matter in the state to get that done. What's missing from the list? These are the things I didn't see on the list. And this is probably what's next. If you're thinking of the future of policy and what's coming next, these are the things that probably all kind of meld together. It's not just solar by itself, it's solar combined with this other stuff, right? Smart, distributed, clean energy systems. The irony is you put these kinds of things together, some of these things together, you don't really use the grid very much. You may not need to ever net meter again. You really completely transform how we use electricity, and that's really interesting and really scary, right? For utilities, that's a game changer and very valuable. It's not going to eliminate utilities or train wreck an industry or anything of that nature, but it's a paradigm shift that looks to be coming from my viewpoint. And I'm guessing in the next year or two, we're going to see a lot more headlines about that in Minnesota. So the last kind of piece of the puzzle is to look ahead, to look at what is going to happen next year, what's going to happen not only here next year, but nationally next year, and how does it impact what you guys are trying to do, which is a big implementation here. Bloomberg says that with the ITC expiring, our industry gets cut dramatically next year at a national level. With the ITC extension and expiring in 2022, it keeps on clipping away. I don't agree with all the numbers and the specifics. That doesn't matter. That's the point of the slide, is that obviously there will be a substantive impact. What does that look like in Minnesota? May not be that big of an impact depending on how you all implement and how things look here in 12 months. SEIA at the national level has been a big campaign fight on to get the ITC extended. 100,000 jobs at stake. That's what they say, 100,000 jobs at stake. Costs have, you look at what is the ITC extension about, it's about pricing, right? It's all about the price of solar. If you look at the price of solar in general, it's flat. My pricing from 2014 to 2016 hasn't changed in terms of my cost assumptions and how I do things and look at things. Not a lot of innovation going on right now on the price side, not fast enough at least. If you look at this is probably one of the more interesting slides and charts that I've seen that I want to share with you all. This is a DOE Sunshot presentation. Their perception, which basically says that the black line and sort of the shadow behind line is natural gas. The orange and green are solar. And basically what they show is from 2016 to 2040, right? 2016 is far left, 2040 is far right. The data for solar going down, 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 and becoming less expensive than natural gas is completely dependent from an assumption standpoint in this data on the ITC. So without the sense of the ITC, this chart changes dramatically. I think the good news is that solar does eventually become less expensive than natural gas because natural gas is going to increase incrementally and slowly over the next 10 to 20 years. However, the question is, when does that paradigm shift happen? When does that inflection point happen? It's going to happen in 5 to 10 years if the ITC or the cost game continues to go down the road that we have it going down. It may be 10 to 20 years if we don't get the ITC extended. So, there's a pretty big implication here if you think about that and look at that. I've spent a lot of time looking at natural gas futures and merchant markets for solar and things like that in places like Texas in the last year. And, it's an very interesting thing to look at as it compares to solar. So I spent a lot of time this year figuring out 20%. Okay, I don't believe Congress is going to re-up or allow the passage of the ITC extension. I really hope I'm wrong, but I'm not counting on it. And if that's true, what's going to change? I know for a fact that there are major module manufacturers that are looking to construct new factories in regions of the world that will never be touched by the Chinese tariff. So the tariff, thank you Solar World again for your help in increasing our cost of solar 5 to 10%. Our tariff issue on modules is making us artificially increase our cost of solar 5 to 10%. Module manufacturers are going to help us get around that. That's going to come in the end of 17 or sometime in 18, as I've been told so far. That's a big deal, right? That helps us to ratchet down that need for ITC, starting in 17, 18, maybe 19, 20 for sure for the broad market. We're having a major boom year in 16, there's no question about it. Everyone's getting their 17 projects done in 16, so as a result of that, there's going to be less volume of work for everybody in 17. Everyone's assuming that. There's an assumption that inverters, racks, construction, everything's going to go down a little bit, a couple points at least, because they're going to want more work. Cost of financing, that's going in the wrong direction, that's going up. There's no question that's going up. When interest rates rise, our cost of financing rises, our PPA rates rise. There's a direct correlation there, right? So that's going in the wrong direction. Creativity of the developers to put it in the right places. I challenge every developer in the room, figure out how to shave 5% just by being smart. Figure out the low-cost interconnection. Figure out the right place to put the solar. Figure out where it adds value more than anything else. Don't just jam it in, get it done, and do it strategically. And the last thing, which is really the highlight of the most important thing, the will of the people, right? Why is this industry where it is today? Because the will of the people of the United States of America. We would not be here without that will. Why are we all sitting in this room today? Because of the will of the people. Because of not only of us, but every person in the state who wanted to go forward and do this, get that law enacted, get more legislation enacted, work on this every single day. The will of the people is everything. Economic development, clean energy, freedom of choose, I don't care what the strategy is. The will of the people is priceless. And this is sort of this was the thing that caught my eye. This is a big game changer for me. I think this is coming for all of us. And that is energy storage. Next year, a CEO stating that he could see energy storage replacing natural gas meters post-2020. That's a huge game changer for all of us. So, we have all these concerns about the ITC. If the cost of storage comes down fast enough, well, that value of solar conversation just became really interesting, right? Value of solar with storage means it's just like everything else on the grid. All of a sudden, you're having an entire different discussion. That is innovation. It may take 5 or 6 years for us to get there, but there's hope right around the corner that we can innovate a little bit further. So this is my last slide, my last meaningful slide at least. Implementation, implementation, implementation. I'll say it again. You are all on a national stage. The world is watching to see, can Minnesota get it done? And it really comes down to how you all implement. Don't let anything get in your way of getting this done. Implement like nobody's business. How you implement, I don't know. This is going to be the most interesting part of the equation. What is the PUC's, the utilities, and the solar industry's role? What can each city and county and university, what can everybody do? How can everybody help with this implementation to make it successful? I really challenge the people in this room to think about that and to play your part and to figure that out. And then what does it look like? Is it the national industry coming in and a very small local industry? Or is it a big local industry with some national player help? I don't know. That's up to you guys about how you all decide to implement the programs. And what does the program mix look like? Well, we know that utility scale solar and utility scale wind is really what fits easily and efficiently for a lot of utilities. But the value piece, residential, C9 community, that's where there's a lot of value for their customers. It may not be the same brass tacks, low cost piece of the puzzle, but there's value there. And that seems to be continuing to be missed. So the question for us is, or for all of us is, how do we make sure that that's real, that those programs are meaningful, and that they get done? So, my biggest challenge for you all is to have one heck of a good 2016 verse. I can read the one line, or I can do what I did last year, and I think Robin Williams just does a better job than I do. So I'm going to put this on one more time.
We don't read and write poetry because it's cute. We read and write poetry because we are members of the human race. And the human race is filled with passion. Medicine, law, business, engineering, these are noble pursuits necessary to sustain life. But poetry, beauty, romance, love, these are what we stay alive for. To quote from Whitman, "O me, O life of the questions of these recurring, of the endless trains of the faithless, of cities filled with the foolish. What good amid these, O me, O life? Answer, that you are here, that life exists in identity, that the powerful play goes on and you to contribute a verse. That the powerful play goes on and you may contribute a verse. What will your verse be?